Welcome to the We as Citizens podcast. Here is your host, Christina Crowley.
On today's podcast, I am welcoming Wendy Matthews, Veganuary's U.S. Director. Veganuary is a nonprofit organization inspiring people to try vegan for January and throughout the rest of the year. Welcome, Wendy.
Thanks, Christina. I'm so happy to be here.
I'm glad you're coming on today. Tell us a bit about your experience with becoming vegan.
Sure. So my story is a bit of a long one. It may surprise you to know I grew up in a farming region in a family of hunters and fishermen. So clearly I'm the rebel child. But like many of us, I really didn't think much about where my food came from until college. And I went to St. Lawrence University in upstate New York. And I was minoring in environmental studies. And I took a course on local food systems. And as part of that course, I was assigned to read Michael Pollan's Omnivore's Dilemma. And it was the first time I had ever even heard the term factory farming. But I was appalled. I mean, I remember some of the anecdotes he tells in the book. One is about cows in Montana being fed waste from a candy factory and all these things that just seemed so broken to me. And I just had this sense that there was something wrong with our food system. And I would love to tell you that I went vegan overnight, but I really tried everything I possibly could to avoid the inevitable conclusion that vegan was the lowest impact way to live. I started out buying cage-free and free-range products, but the more I learned, I read that you really just can't trust those labels. And so I decided if I were going to continue eating meat, I needed to quote unquote look it in the face. And I started volunteering on a small organic pig and chicken farm. And the animals on this farm were well cared for. They had names, they had plenty of space. I mean, it was really a beautiful farm. And I thought, yes, this is what it should be like. But then came the day, and I'll avoid getting too graphic, but the piglets were to be castrated. And I remember, assisting the farmer in this as part of my volunteer job. And I was holding a tiny piglet in my arms, and it was just clearly suffering and wailing in pain. And I realized that even on the nicest farm I could possibly imagine, there were still these things that had to happen for me to eat animals that I was really uncomfortable with. And there was just no way for me to eat animals that aligned with my values. So I decided I would go vegan for 30 days and see how it felt. And 10 years later, here I am.
Ah, awesome. And so also explain for us, for people who are listening who don't know the difference between vegetarian and vegan.
Yes. So vegetarians tend to avoid meat, and vegans avoid all animal products. So meat, dairy, eggs, honey, really anything that comes from an animal.
Sure. Yeah. And so why did you join veganuary.com?
So my career started at an organization called Farm Sanctuary. Right out of college, I took a job there, and they do animal rescue from animals, mostly that come from factory farms. So I started out, giving tours, introducing people to animals, really passionate about animal protection issues. And again on tours, I would watch people make the connection with an animal or learn something about the environmental devastation and want to go vegan, but just not know how. They saw the why, but they weren't sure on the how. And I found that that's something that I'm really passionate about, is helping people make the move and find ways to transition their diet. So I started looking into careers that would follow that passion. And I have just watched Veganuary grow in the UK and been so inspired by the work they do. So when I learned they were looking to globalize and come into the US, I thought, yes, that's the challenge that I'm ready to take on. And given my own experience starting out by going vegan for a month, I really believe in the 31-day model. It's contained, so it feels manageable when you're first starting out, but it's enough time to enable you to discover new foods and look at the grocery store a little bit differently and look at a menu a little bit differently and just see that there's already so much great plant-based food right in front of you.
Yeah, with my experience with, I can be vegan for long periods of time and then I fall off the wagon, and it's not the easiest thing. It is a good choice for me. For people like myself who can do for long periods of time, and I've been all over the Veganuary website, and it's very supportive. It's very, if you slip up, just pick yourself up and continue on a little bit. And for those of us who are doing this, it's not really strict, it's not really hardcore. It's very kind and open, and here, let us help you.
Yeah, that's the goal, right? I think that there's a tendency within the vegan movement sometimes to, be judgmental and non-inclusive. And with Veganuary, I mean, there are no vegan police here. We're here to create a welcoming and non-judgmental and inclusive space. And I really like to use the analogy of yoga. If you just start out taking a yoga class and you're struggling to get some of the poses, none of the other yogis are going to kick you out the door and tell you, sorry, this isn't for you. They'd encourage you to keep trying and to be gentle and to see it as a practice. And the vegan community has sometimes not had that same spirit. And I think that comes from a good place. People are passionate about the cause and they understand what's at stake here in terms of animal lives and in terms of environmental destruction. But both of those causes, the planet and animals, are served much more by someone who's eating plant-based as much as they can than someone who's been turned off completely by negativity. So I think that it's so important to be kind and compassionate with people as they're starting out.
Because activism, it should have more of a positive connotation. But I think when people think activism, they think of something that isn't so nice. And I know I was pleasantly surprised when I stumbled upon you and your group, that it is gentle, it is kindness, you are what you preach.
Absolutely. And, I have great respect for all types of activists. There are organizations who take a much different and much more in-your-face approach, and some people resonate with that. But if someone tends to be more tends to respond more to a gentler hand, then we're here for them. And I think that it does take all kinds.
And with becoming vegan, what are some of the main objections you hear from people who would be like, oh, I really want to do it, but I can't do it? I know I have my own, or I had my own. It's becoming less and less. I find it's a choice for me. What do you hear a lot with objections to becoming vegan?
Yeah, I think two of the biggest things I hear, number one is always cheese, right? What would I do without cheese? How could I give up cheese? And I'll admit, when I first went vegan, that was my fear as well. Yeah, I was a big dairy lover. And I just couldn't imagine life without cheese. And in the beginning, I didn't sign up for something like Veganuary. I didn't really have the support system. I just kind of created my own challenge for 30 days. And I made some real missteps. I remember making this macaroni and cheese dish for my boyfriend at the time and it was just not a very good recipe. And we both sat down and were cringing, like, can we really do this? But luckily now there's so many amazing vegan cheese products out there. I mean, look at your grocery store shelves, and even in, the Midwest and large grocery chains, you can usually find at least one option. And some of them are really fantastic. So we've come a long way in that regard. And, for me, giving up dairy was the biggest driver of health benefits. So I used to get a lot of migraines. Yeah. My skin used to break out really bad. And, as soon as I gave up dairy, I saw a lot of changes there, and I felt better ever since. So for me, that was a really positive move.
And also with people, I'm sure they think, how am I going to get my protein? How do I get my protein?
Yes, that was the other question. I said there were two, and I forgot to follow up on the second. But yes, protein is the big question. And you can absolutely get an adequate amount of protein, calcium, and any other nutrient on a vegan diet. And that's backed up by the American Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics. Of course, everyone's protein needs are different depending on how much you work out. But, most foods many vegetable foods contain protein. So, we tend to think of only meat as containing protein, but beans contain protein, rice contains protein, even broccoli has some amount of protein in it. So if you start to look at the grams of protein in everything you're eating during the day, it adds up fairly quickly. And if you are an athlete, for example, my partner has been doing CrossFit lately. And so we've been trying to be more mindful of how much protein he's getting. He's also vegan. So he'll do a protein shake in the morning, just to know that he's getting that scoop of a, extra 20 grams of protein. But there's a lot of great vegan protein boosters out there too.
Yeah, I know Costco has some awesome pea protein and a peanut butter chocolate pea protein. It's
That's the one that
amazing.
we are using. Yeah, it's quite good. It's like a
It
snack.
is. It fulfills your sweet tooth, and it's healthy for you too.
Exactly.
Yeah. And so how is veganism better for the planet?
So we just had some research done by Dr. Helen Harwett from Harvard. She's part of their animal law and policy program. And she calculated for us the collective impact of 1 million people having done Veganuary, because as of this fall, that's where we were at. So what she found was pretty impressive. Collectively, participants had saved the CO2 equivalent of driving around the world almost 15,000 times, the equivalent of 1,645 metric tons of sewage, and 6.2 million liters of water, which is the same as flushing the toilet almost 500,000 times. So while it's only 31 days, collectively, we really do make an impact. And that's just, Veganuary participants, but, the vegan diet as a whole there's a lot of evidence showing it's the best diet for the planet. And research has shown that animal agriculture is a leading contributor of climate change and gases and a key driver of deforestation and species loss, which is why Oxford University researchers recently said the single biggest thing anyone can do to help the planet is to go vegan.
And my father was a rancher up in Montana. I grew up in Montana. I grew up in the city. I never lived on the ranch. But my dad even used to say, the cows need to be milked. The chickens lay eggs. And what do you say to that kind of a thing that people say, well, that's going to happen anyway. Why shouldn't I have that if that's what is?
It's a common misconception that cows just need to be milked. But they really, like humans, they only lactate if they've been impregnated. So if a cow has been pregnant and given birth, she will produce milk, but otherwise she wouldn't. So it's because we are impregnating these animals, and then taking the calves away so that they can be milked, so the milk can be sold for consumption, that they need to be milked. So then with eggs, chickens, it's part of their cycle. So chickens are laying eggs no matter what, but the reason they yield as many eggs as they do now is because of selective breeding. So we've bred chickens, and I used to have this information at my fingertips when I worked at Farm Sanctuary, and I don't any longer, but the amount of eggs that a chicken would lay naturally is drastically lower than what modern day chickens lay based on the way that they've been bred. So a lot of it is human caused production, and it's not just a necessity of nature, but it's something that we're really driving.
Natural. Yeah, it's not a natural way of being. I think is a big misconception that the animals are going to do this anyway. It's a horrible life. I know the chickens I've read, I have done a lot of reading. It's not a good life when we can not have the animals suffer like that, and we can get our nutrients from somewhere else.
Yeah, especially working in animal rescue before, I've just seen some things that I really can't unsee. And one moment I'll never forget was it was an egg farm in California. And I don't remember the story exactly, but it was a neglect case where the chickens had just been abandoned essentially on this farm, and the farmer had run out of money and kind of just left them to die essentially. And so the chickens were brought to the sanctuary, and they had all lived in battery cages their entire lives, which the space that they're on is about the screen of an iPad for their entire lives, and they can't spread their wings, and there's 10 to a cage, and just nothing natural about their life at all. Mm-hmm. And so we finally got them to the sanctuary and threw open the cage doors, and they were, I was expecting this beautiful moment where they all rushed into the grass and enjoyed the sunshine, and they were terrified. They had no idea what it was. They didn't know what it meant to be outside. They didn't know what it meant to breathe fresh air. And it took quite some time for them to even come out and experience life as chickens. And even then they would huddled together in the corner because all they'd ever known was being packed that tightly. And, with time, of course, they got used to the freedom and started to really enjoy their lives. And it was so gratifying to watch. But I'll never forget just the fear of being raised in such an unnatural way.
Really wanted to talk with you about a lot of these misconceptions because I think it's really important. Let's say we do change to having more and more people eat vegan. What things that I've heard from people that I know and people that I've talked with this about, they're like, well, what about displacing workers? What about the people who work in these industries?
It's a really important question, and it's one that I get often. What I like to tell people is that vegans are not a threat to farmers. Vegans absolutely need farmers. Plants come from farms too. And as the demand for plant-based grows, the amount of workers needed on farms producing things like fruits and vegetables and grains will increase too, and the production model will shift. And actually, one of the biggest threats to farmers is climate change. And climate scientists tell us we have 12 years to reduce emissions before damage is irreversible. And the one thing they advise in order to do that is to eat more plant-based foods. So if our government is really serious about tackling climate change, they'll assist farmers in transitioning away from animal farming and into producing more sustainable, high-protein plant crops.
And the economics of it, when they do that, are they the same or better for the farmers?
That's not something I'm intimately involved in. It's something I'm very interested in, but it's not work that I'm doing myself. But I know there are a lot of really great organizations out there right now who are putting a lot of thought and planning and economic modeling into this issue. The vegan cheese company Miyoko's, for example, is partnered with a group called Mercy for Animals, and they are working on helping ranchers shift away from raising livestock in a sustainable way. So it'd be a good place to look.
So it is sustainable and our health will change. Isn't that right? And so that would change healthcare costs. I'm thinking about for people whose objections to veganism are economic, because there's like the guns or butter dilemma in economics. You have enough for one or the other. And I think as we get healthier, that'll open up other opportunities. Our monies that we put into being sick because of eating animals and eating things that just aren't good for us that come from the animal products could be resourced into other things that maybe we just don't know yet.
Absolutely. I know there's a stat out there about the amount that you would save on healthcare costs if everyone were to go plant-based, and it was in the billions. Certainly most of the major diseases that are affecting Americans right now, like heart disease and cancers, there's research to show that the incidence of them is less if you're on a plant-based diet, and that's research that's been done by the ADA and some major health organizations. So I think the case can be made that certainly healthcare costs would be reduced if people were to eat more plant-based.
Yes, definitely. I definitely think that. I had a talk recently with a friend of mine who is an alternative medicine doctor, and we had a long conversation on how things would shift if we were healthier, and veganism being one way to be healthier. And so I think one of the things I hear the most, and I hear from family members and myself, I was this way when I first started trying to become vegan, is I was like, I hate veggies. I hate this. I can't do it.
Yeah, I mean, the prospect of changing your entire diet and maybe never eating certain foods again or being forced to eat some foods you don't like seems completely overwhelming, especially if you don't know what products are out there to help make that transition. So that's why we encourage people, first and foremost, if you're going to make the transition, sign up with us at veganuary.com. You can do it in January, but it's also open the rest of the year. And that way you can get the support and resources you need to be successful. And beyond that, I would offer two pieces of advice. The first would be stop thinking of it as an all or nothing commitment. I touched on this earlier, but you're human and you're going to make mistakes. And if you slip up, don't see it as a reason to give up completely. Just keep trying your best and know that it's going to get easier. And secondly, of course, I recommend that everyone eats vegetables, for their health, but you don't need to reinvent your entire diet on day one, right? Mm-hmm. Start by veganizing familiar dishes instead of exploring new things. You can for example, if in a normal dinner for you would be spaghetti bolognese, then instead of using ground beef, try beefless crumbles, and you can find those in the freezer aisle of a lot of major grocers. Or if you typically have a burger and fries for dinner, try a veggie burger. There's so many kinds out there now that you can try. There's got to be one out there for everybody.
Yeah.
And these are pretty simple swaps, and for the most part, you'd be hard pressed to tell the difference.
They are delicious. They really are. And I think that your tastes also change little by little as you change little by little, swapping out. Even going meatless Mondays, I started to look forward to it. I do love spaghetti bolognese, and even swapping out the noodles for spaghetti squash or zucchini squash. There are big chains right now that are having those substitutions. Such as I think Noodles and Company has veggie noodles. They have rice, cauliflower rice, and there's a lot of different ways to do it. And I think their marinara, their red sauce, I think that's vegan too.
Yeah. And that's a good point too. If the easiest transition is something that's similar to meat at first, right? So maybe trying the meatless crumbles instead of beef. But then as you continue, transitioning your diet, you might find that you like lentils instead of ground beef, and that gives you some extra protein. Or I actually made a bolognese that uses walnuts and cauliflower that you kind of grind up, and it sounds weird, but it's delicious. So there's a lot of way to sneak extra nutrients into your meals.
Mushrooms are excellent as a substitution with the meatless crumbles. I think they take on a nice flavor, and they're meaty. It's really yummy.
Absolutely. And they have that vitamin D, which we can all use this time of year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I totally understand that. So how do you talk to somebody, or how do you talk to others about becoming vegan, whether whatever their reactions are to it? There's a myriad of reactions that people have to others who are becoming vegan.
Sure. I would say the most important thing is kindness. And I've touched on that a few times throughout our conversation, so I won't harp on it too much. But I do think that, just being welcoming and non-judgmental, and remembering that at one point this was all new to you too, is really important. Like, in some ways, I'm grateful for my past and the fact that I took such a long time to come to veganism, because I remember what it was like to resist it with all my heart. And I remember how liberating it was to finally realize that it was the right choice for me. So I think just being compassionate with people and meeting them where they are is incredibly important. And another word that comes to mind for me is authenticity. There's this influencer on TikTok right now, you might know, Tabitha Brown, who's wildly popular. And I think the reason people gravitate towards her is because she's so fully herself. When she's cooking vegan, she's having fun, she's laughing at her mistakes, she's cheering people on, and she shares the struggles that brought her ultimately to this lifestyle. I think there's just something so magnetic about seeing someone living their best life. So, if you're passionate about food, then food is your activism, and share that with people. And that's how you'll bring them around. If you're passionate about climate issues, use that as your starting point. The best way to be a role model to inspire other people to be vegan is to start with what inspires you.
Because I know when I first started experimenting being vegan, I lived in a house with 7 other people, and 6 of them were vegans.
That always helps.
Yeah, well, and they just couldn't stand the smell of it, and it made them, and I didn't understand that. So for me, it was quite the learning process. Half of them were nice, 3 of them were nice, and 3 of them were just like, oh, talk to the hand. Just,
oh, no.
They couldn't deal with it. And so I did experience both, but I came to understand that, there was a lot of health benefits. I looked at them, and their glowing skin, and they were very healthy. And, and there was a lot of education that the ones who were really kind to me helped do for me. Now it's taken me a lot of years since then. I've done Veganuary before, and I have Veganuary, sorry.
It's a tough one. It really is.
And I've done it before, and this year I'm doing it, and it's, the hardest things for me still are the cheese and the creamer. Yeah. I love coffee creamer, and I have allergies. And though I do find that when I when I eat vegan, my allergies are less, even though some of my allergies are to plant-based foods, they are less, and I do feel better. And going back, because I kind of talked about your tastes changing, they do change little by little, and so it does get easier.
It really does. I remember, the first plant-based cheese I tried a long time ago now, but I just, it didn't vibe with me at all. I just thought it was odd and the texture was off. And I thought there's no way I can do this, but it does take your body a little bit of time to adjust. And now I love it. Now I crave it. So I would encourage people, maybe put a little space between giving up cheese and trying vegan cheese. I think that's important, because then you're not comparing like to like exactly. Yeah. And, it gives your taste buds a little bit of time to adjust. That being said, there's some really, really great cheeses out there now. They're not the squeaky vegan cheeses of the past. They're, fermented artisanal cheeses. So there's a lot of great products to try. And creamer is a tricky one for people too. I actually struggled to find a creamer I liked as well, because I'm someone who likes my coffee, as pale as it gets, right? I can't do the black coffee, and I just wasn't getting the right consistency, but I found one recently that's vegan half and half. It's probably not the healthiest morning start, but I love it in my coffee. So I'll have to send you a link.
Absolutely, because I that's my hardest thing. I love my coffee in the morning, and I went back to having cream in my coffee about a year ago. and I just need it. I used to be able to drink it straight. Now I've tried to go back to just black coffee. I can't do it.
No, me neither.
We all have our vices, and we all have our things that we recognize that are really hard. And I will start working on the cheese again, because I love cheese on things. I love cheese on my noodles. I do need to look more and more, because those are where I really slip up.
January is such a good time to try all these new things too, because companies are rolling out new products in January for Veganuary, and also offering promotions. So if you look on our website, there's a page called Special Offers, and it's all these great vegan brands that are offering discounts and sampler packs and things like that for people who want to transition. So it's a nice time to test out some new products.
And there's a lot of great recipes on the website. There's a lot of things that I wouldn't have thought of, that when you think it's boring, it's not.
No, before I was vegan, I would have maybe chicken breast and broccoli and rice for dinner 4 times a week. And now, the amount of different grains and vegetables and fruits I eat has exploded. My diet has gotten vastly more interesting.
And for somebody like me, I know that being able to feel full is important. And you can, though calories are calories, you can eat more veggies. Quantity of veggies is per quantity of non-veggies, non-vegan foods are, you get a lot more. You can, if you're, depending on what you're eating, so you can get that fullness. You don't feel deprived.
No, absolutely not.
What were some of the things that helped you manage becoming vegan early on? A lot of us are working from home right now, but working outside of the home, having to take your lunch with you all the time, what helped you?
I think that community is the most important thing, now more than ever, because we are all feeling so isolated the last year. And I think that can be a couple of different things. That can mean, doing it with a friend or a family member, getting someone to take the plunge with you so that you can have, get excited about new products together and share advice and stories. But if that's not available to you, Veganuary also is a fast-growing community, and we really strive to make participants feel that sense of support and connection. One of the places I see that most is in our private Facebook group. So anyone who signs up gets an access code to join this group, and they share advice and questions and tons of product recommendations. And I think that camaraderie, makes it a lot of fun and a lot easier for people. And not only does it make it easier on participants, but it really increases the chance that people will be successful with the behavior change. So not to get too heavy into the data, but this is a stat that I just find really interesting. We had a survey done in 2020 of people who had done Veganuary, and only 18% said they got through the full month, and only 8% said they planned to stay vegan. But of that group, only a third of the people had actually registered with us. So a lot of people do Veganuary because it's this trendy thing and they hear about it in the media. They don't realize there's a nonprofit behind it and they don't realize they can register. So only a third of that group had registered. And we did a similar study of participants who had signed up through Veganuary. And of that group, 69% said they had gotten through the month successfully, and 53% planned to stay vegan. So that sense of community and that level of support is so, so important.
What do you consider success getting through the month?
It's all self-reported. So we do a survey at the end and say, how did it go? And did you, were you able to eat vegan most of the time? So people in the survey had reported that they got through the month eating vegan.
Yeah, because I consider myself somewhat successful because we're day 15 and I haven't had any meat.
Amazing.
Yeah.
And successful is the wrong word. I guess that paints the wrong picture, right? Because we don't want people to feel like they're unsuccessful if they slip up and come back. That was just the language of that survey.
I think I was just shooting for, there's some gray area, successful, to one person is absolutely 100% strict, and successful is, I did my darn right best.
Exactly, right. And of course, our goal is always to help people make the transition to fully vegan, but I think that anything headed in that direction is a win.
And I do lurk the Facebook group, and I was reading yesterday, somebody writing how nice these people are, how supportive they are. It was not what they expected at all. And I'm like, that's awesome. That's great.
That's something I'm really proud of. The group has been incredible this year. I mean, it's just so supportive. People come in there a lot to, kind of bemoan a mistake they made and they feel awful. And everyone just gives them great advice on how to do better next time. And it's really warm, really supportive.
Yeah, perfectly imperfect, I think, is a lot of the way a lot of people can describe this month and continuing on. I think it's important because it makes it manageable. It makes it doable. It makes it supportive. My roommate is very supportive of me in this, but they're like, no.
Live and let live. Yeah.
Exactly. But as supportive as they can be, and they'll try some stuff. And I know that because they know that their tastes will change. And I think that that's really important. So what is the biggest thing about being vegan, either being associated with the Veganuary or your own experience that you'd like to leave listeners with?
That's such a great question. The thing that really inspires me lately is helping people align their values with their actions. I think most of us love animals. Most of us want to see, the reduction in climate change, and most of us want to enjoy good health. I think a lot of us get stuck in familiar systems and do the same things day by day. But there's an anxiety that comes with that, with having a sense in the back of your mind that, maybe something could be different and maybe the actions you're taking, aren't aligned with those values. And so I think it's really important to find what motivates you and inspires you and find your why before you start to make changes. But there's, such a feeling of well-being that comes with knowing that your choices are lined up with things that you care about. So yeah, we'll leave you with that and just say that Veganuary, it's not too late to sign up. You can join us mid-month. We'd love to have anyone who'd like to get on board, and we do offer the pledge year-round.
Yeah, and I think that's important for some people. January is too much. Starting in February, I think, is a good thing too. Starting in March, or just when you slip up, starting again. It's one of those things that it's doable. There's no judgment, and every little bit helps.
Yes, absolutely.
Well, thank you so much for being with us today, Wendy. I do appreciate your time.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure talking with you, and good luck with the next 2 weeks of Veganuary.
Thank you. I'm doing well, and I'll let you know how I do.
Awesome.
Thank you for listening to the podcast. Be sure to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. The We as Citizens podcast, because conversation matters.